Hi, everyone. As we get everyone starting to join today's session, I've popped in the details in the chat. And also you can see the screen. I might just enlarge it for now on the Slido. We wanted to kick off today's session with a bit of a poll just to get a sense of where you are, how you're feeling, all that kind of stuff. So if you could join Slido and just let us know. And the first question that we posed to you guys is wrong question. Already feeling a Slido, is to give us some words on how you're feeling today. Let us know what you're feeling, what you're thinking. Just pop that in when you get a chance. I've put the details also in the chat again. So yeah, as people filter in before we kick off, it'd be great to hear from you guys.
Cool. I hope there's some festivity out there.
Yeah.
It's not long, is it? 10 days, as my kids keep reminding me.
Oh, I hear you. I'm tired at the moment. I think, Tanya, to what you just pointed out, it's just a sense of so many things coming to a head before you can officially be signed off for the holidays. Intrigued. I like that one.
Definitely feel festive.
Yeah.
I can feel all of those things at the moment, actually.
No. I feel like someone's just got it into my brain. Also, if you have any issues with logging into the Slido, please feel free to just drop in how you're feeling in the chat also, whatever's easier for you.
Yeah. Ready for Friday. I'm there too. Right. Do you know, I've got this wonderful mix at the moment of feeling this excitement for Christmas, and then the tiredness, and then the brightness that I'm about to get to spend time with family.
Oh, I know.
All lockdowns permitting. Happy. That's cool. Festive's coming through strong.
Yeah, amazing. I love that.
I don't know if you guys are all still at uni at the moment or whether you've finished studies for Christmas. If anyone wants to talk back in the chat, you're very welcome to drop in any other thoughts.
Yeah, we've got in the chat, we have curious and optimistic. Excited to hear about this topic. No pressure. This is great. Thanks, guys.
Curious. Someone's feeling stretched. Well, I hope this gives you an hour refresh and an hour to think about something different. I think I speak for Arthur and I, and these we're getting to talk about topics that are really close to our heart, and I do consider it such a privilege to be in this role. So I hope we can share some of that with you today, and this is a little oasis in that stretched period, and maybe a little refresher for the tiredness. Okay.
I think we've got
3 minutes in. Should we go? We'll go into some introductions, I think. Yeah. So feel free to keep adding into the Slido if you want to at the moment. Welcome everyone. Arthur's already said welcome. I am Tanya, so Tanya Gribble. I joined Ocado 18 months ago, 2019, and I actually started in the transformation in the change team before coming into this role in April this year. So my role now is Global Head of Culture and Inclusion, which is a super exciting area, super exciting role. My background has been in change for many years with a real focus on culture. I started in consulting, so started doing systems work, worked in a couple of different countries, spent quite a lot of time in Australia. So really doing big systems change at first, and then moving more into supply chain, and then quite quickly into cultural change from there. So worked in many cultures. The coal industry in Australia had to be my favorite, possibly because I got to live half an hour from the beach and half an hour from the vineyards. But also it genuinely was such a shift in culture there. So culture is really an experience of mine, and inclusion is a passion. You know, everyone, my belief is truly that everyone has the right to be respected as a human being, and as organizations, everyone deserves the right to thrive, and that's our role to create a place where everyone can thrive and be themselves. So that's my quick intro. I'm sure you'll learn more about me as we go through this session, but Arthi, do you want to do a quick intro?
Yeah, so thanks. Thanks, Tanya. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you virtually. So Arthi Kashyap Ainsley. Similar to Tanya, I recently joined Ocado a little bit later than she did. So actually, I'm about 8.5 months in, and I joined as their global head of health and well-being. Very similar to Tanya, I've spent all of my career pretty much up until joining Ocado in professional services. So you probably never expect a health and well-being lead to be an accountant, but that's basically how I started my career. So I'm a chartered accountant, worked at PwC between audit, tax, and advisory, and spent just over a decade with Deloitte in management consulting, 8 years of which I was doing finance consulting, but loads of different bits and bobs around leadership development. I did a lot with our junior talent, so a lot in the space that you guys are in right now in our new grad program. And then made the jump to the health and well-being space a few years ago. And similar to some of the stuff that Tanya said, I think this role is a really big privilege. It's a huge responsibility, and I definitely don't take it lightly. I am someone who sort of lives and breathes health and well-being in my personal life, and it's quite interesting because now my personal and professional life have really collided in that my passions really match my job, which can be a bit of a struggle sometimes, but is also equally really powerful because it just, it keeps me in check and balance in that way. And that's me kind of in a nutshell.
Awesome. So guys, what we want to do with this session today is we want to make it interactive. It is 10 days to Christmas, so that kind of the good and the festivity, we're going to try and bring some of that with it, and make this session beautifully interactive. We really want to bring out for you how the worlds of well-being and inclusion, how we see them and how intertwined we believe that they are, and how we work with that at Ocado. We want to give you guys something as individuals to take away from this, so that it's truly time well spent for you, not just the information that will give you and the insight into the world at Ocado, but actually giving you something to take away for yourself, for your own well-being and understanding yourselves a little more. So yes, people are already jumping in with the Slido. So tell us, what did you want to get out of this session? And then hopefully we can blend some of our thinking with what we hear from you now in the Slido, and make sure it's a really fun 50 minutes or so. So you should, I think everyone's probably in the Slido by now. I don't think we've had anyone new join, but you can see on the screen there, slido.com, and then you've got the number that you need to put in. So 854263.
And just so you know, we will leave some time at the end for Q&A. We'll leave about 15 minutes, give or take, and we will be joined by someone from our grad team who will also be able to help with some of the questions that might come through in your mind. So picking up on the comment on Slido around what makes a strong application, I'm sure Joanna will be able to lean into some of those questions that you guys have. So if we don't cover that content specifically in terms of what we cover, we will have someone on hand to answer some of those questions at the end.
I'm just scribbling some of these down on my paper so I remember them.
Yeah.
This screen will go, but some really interesting things. Insight into Ocado, learning about the culture.
Make this bigger also.
Yeah, what we actually do about diversity, that's a really good question. Is it all just marketing? I'll paraphrase that to, is it all just talk? So it's definitely not with us at Ocado. So let me give you some examples of what we're actually doing about it. A well-being there.
I'd love to know who's worked in the arena for a while. Maybe I have some things to learn from you and some tips, but yeah, I'll definitely touch on some of the policies that we have in place. I probably won't go through the laundry list of stuff, but we'll definitely give you a whistle-stop tour for sure. Also throughout, we are going to rely on using Slido. We probably only have one more question left on Slido to use, but throughout, if there's anything, what I would say is if we're going through things and questions start to pop into your mind for the Q&A that we have at the end, feel free to just pop them into the chat so we have them. What I don't want you to do is lose the thought you might have and not be able to come back to it. So just keep the chat very fluid and pop things in. We'll make sure that when we go through the Q&A at the end that we're scrolling through it at that time.
That's a great question. Is everyone on the same page?
Yeah.
I can answer that quite quickly now, which is no, because everyone's got different experience and coming from different angles, but we're getting everyone closer, and it's really encouraging to see progress in such a short space of time that I've been in this role. So yeah, I'll give you some of the examples when we get to it later.
That might be actually a really nice segue into just going into the area that we want to start off with. So oftentimes when we have these conversations around inclusion and health and well-being, there's an element of really understanding how we show up for ourselves and our individual unique characteristics. And so the next question in the Slido, if you guys can go, I'm going to go to that. If you can take a few minutes to let us know what makes you, sorry, I'm trying to find the arrow on the screen, what makes you unique. And think about it from all levels and spectrums around what makes you unique, right? So is it, I don't know, the way you dress, the way you show up, your voice, whatever it is, just let us know what you think drives your uniqueness. And again, you can feel free to use the chat however you feel that suits.
Yeah. And this is what makes you think, you feel you unique. So there's no right or wrong here.
Yeah. I'll give you guys a couple minutes. And like I said, if you want to use the chat, feel free to use the chat. Great. So I'll wait till some of the comments and stuff come through on it. But the reason why this is so important is because so often in these situations, we join organizations, we get involved in our jobs, and we reach points where we feel like we're kind of at a stop hold. We're struggling, we're stressed, we're dealing with things mentally, but we don't really understand where it's coming from. And oftentimes this is driven by this sense of just understanding ourselves a little bit better, right? So how do we show up? And then how can we articulate that to the other people around us, right? So if I pick on some of the things that are coming in, there's my energy, my skill set, communication style, your mindset, the approach that you have, the ability to want to learn new things and how you approach things. I mean, there's such a strong set of diverse skill sets and characteristics that we can articulate and emulate with. I might just give it another minute to see if there's anything that else comes up.
I think this is a really interesting question as well, and I think it can shift over time because we've all got so many dimensions. The things that immediately come to mind now might be quite, for me at least, would be quite different from what would have come to mind 6 months ago, or even 6 weeks ago. So
yes,
it's a wonderful question to keep asking yourself.
I think so. And I think exactly to that point, Tanya, I think what you ask yourself today versus what you ask yourself tomorrow or at the end of the week or a month from now, the answers are going to be quite different and reflective, right? And there's this sense of needing to constantly check in with ourselves and then understanding how that kind of shows up. And I'm sorry, I don't know if we went through it, but the purpose, or I guess the way we want to run the session today, is to keep it as interactive as possible. And so in some of the instances where you might have just had a lot of slides and people telling you what we do with the organizations that they work for, we are going to definitely do that. But how we wanted to kick things off was to have a bit of a conversation about some of these things, but then ultimately give you guys a little bit of space to really reflect on some of these questions and work through an exercise, which I'm going to put up on the screen in a minute or so.
Yeah, and we'll definitely get to the questions and we'll definitely get to that information. But it's so important that we all reflect on who we are, and that's exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about inclusion. We're talking about who are we, and can we bring all of ourselves with us when we come to work, and then we'll lead on to some of the questions around actually what's Ocado doing, how does it do it, is it all talk? It's not, I promise you. But yeah, it'll be really interesting. I love this exercise.
So as we go into the exercise, which I'll put up in a moment, please continue to put stuff into the Slido. I love some of the stuff I love all the stuff that's coming up. But I guess to not reiterate, but to kind of reinstate what we are trying to say is in the topics around inclusion and health and well-being, your uniqueness and how you engage with these topics are really independent and individualistic. The definitions themselves, like for example, if I put it into Google, finding the definition of well-being, I think you get over 1 million different definitions in under 1 second. And then even that, if you look at each of those definitions, they're all variations of similar words around happy and balance. And if you look then at those words individually, what balance means for you versus what balance means for somebody else is very, very different. And so a big part of engaging with these topics and understanding what and how it means for you, and how then therefore you would want a business to show up for you, is really getting a sense of, what does this mean for me? And so what we wanted to do was give you guys some space to do this exercise, which maybe I won't put up for now, actually, and explain where it comes from. So there's a really great website, which I will definitely pop into the chat, so that everyone has access to it, that has driven this idea of this exercise. The website is called The Manual of Me. I swear by it. I think that people that know me probably get sick of the fact that I talk about it all the time in like every single meeting. But it comes with such a great context. So often in our lives, we go through, if we're in our jobs, we're thinking about operating procedures and processes. Day to day, we're thinking about how we need to get from point A to point B. We're constantly thinking about the operations that surround us, but we never think about the most important operation, which is ourselves. So what's the operating manual that we have for ourselves? How do we best show up in the world? And how, therefore, do we need people to show up for us to help us be thriving and successful and in a place where we feel balanced and perfect and sort of how we want to feel on a day-to-day. And so with that, we really want to be able to give you guys the space to develop your own personal manual. So I'm going to put this up. I'm hoping you guys will see it. What we want you to do, and you don't have to do it yet, I'm just going to set the context for the exercise, and then I will say go, and you guys can go. But if you can grab a sheet of paper, and it doesn't have to be, it can be a page in your notebook, it can be a clean sheet of paper, it can be your phone, whatever platform you feel comfortable engaging with. I want you to grab that, whatever that piece looks like. And what you're going to do when I say go is at the top, write your name and your pronouns and any other unique characteristics about yourself that you want to call out. And then from the list of questions that you see on the slide, you're going to have 15 minutes. So if you can't get through all the questions, that's totally fine. I'd say pick 3 and start with 3. And if you finish the 3 in 15 minutes and you want to add more, you can. But really give yourself some space to answer those questions for yourself. What we will do when we do the exercise is Tanya and I will both shut off our cameras and mics, and we will literally give you the space for 15 minutes to think about how you would respond to these questions. And then we'll come back, we'll have a bit of a discussion on the questions, and then we'll go into more or less how this resonates and links to the things that we look at Ocado when we look at inclusion and health and well-being. So if I just set the context, I'll give you an example of my personal manual so that you have a sense of how I would answer these questions or how you could maybe emulate it for when you do the exercise. So my name, Arthi Kashyap Ainsley, my pronouns are she, her. And if I had to add anything else for my unique characteristics standpoint, I would say that I'm a mom, a wife, a leader, and an entrepreneur. And then if I had to pick the questions, I'll just go through and give you the short answers for each of mine. The things you should know about me are that actually my daughter is still quite young. She's just under 2 years. So I feel like I'm at a place in my life where I'm just starting to really grasp and understand managing both home life and work life. And so I somewhat am still struggling with it. It's not easy. Some days I feel like I've won at everything, and other days I feel like I'm a complete failure. But I feel like people need to know that I'm in a process, and that therefore then shows up for everything I do. The things that prevent me from doing my best are not having flexibility, autonomy, and space. Those are the things that I really need to kind of drive success for myself. And I'd say the last piece is support from the people around me that I really need support from. The best way you can check in on me is to ask. I'm not very forthcoming with my feelings, but if you ask, I will pour out. I just need that sense of feeling like you care, or that you've created a psychologically safe environment for me, and I will literally give you everything. When I'm dealing with stress, I need space. I am highly emotive, and so I know that I need to give myself space to step away, to breathe, and to be able to make sense of the emotions and the logic and be able to separate the two. My home working situation is what you see. I'm in a study in my office. My husband is downstairs working in our kitchen, which means I can only eat when he's not in meetings. My best working patterns look flexible. I'm more of an early riser, so I like to start my day first thing in the morning. And I prefer to know that I can take gaps out if I want to do the drop off or the pickup at nursery, if I want to get an early start to dinner and then be able to log back on. So having that flexibility and autonomy is really important to me. And to help me respect the boundaries I'm setting, I would love for people to understand what it is I need so that they can be the ones to hold the mirror up for me. So when they notice that I am not acting at my best, or that I'm taking on too many meetings or too many tasks, they will literally be the ones to call me out on it. That's kind of the behavior that I need around me. So that gives you a sense of, if I was to create my manual, these are the things that I would put on it. And so what we want to do now is give you the space to do that. So it's about 11:20. What I will say is at 11:30, I will check back in and see how you guys are. But we'll have until 35 after the hour to get through the exercise. If you have any questions throughout, while Tanya and I will shut off our mics and cameras, we will be on hand to take any questions. So any questions that come up for you guys, please pop them into the chat. And with that, you can go. You have 15 minutes officially.
Just in case anyone's on their phones, I've just posted in the chat those questions that Arthi spoke through. So in case the slide is too small, have a quick look at the chat and the questions are there. All right, enjoy the exercise.
Hi, everyone. Just wanted to pop back on and let you guys know we have about 5 more minutes. Yeah, just wanted to do a check-in, but you have 5 more minutes before we wrap the exercise up. All right, thanks everyone. So that is 35 after the hour. I would love to bring everyone back into the space by asking you to please use the chat to let me know how that exercise felt for you. So did you know the answers to the questions? Was it simple? How did you find the space? Anything that kind of comes up for you, I would just love for you to share with us what that felt like. I've seen such a varied response to the way this exercise can sometimes sit with people, some from very emotive to very elating, to quite stressful. So it's quite a big spectrum, because I think oftentimes we don't necessarily sit with the questions and give ourselves the space to really answer the things that we know we need to answer. So I would love to hear about it from you guys. And as you guys pop in your thoughts, the one thing I would say is something that an exercise like this gives value to is the fact that oftentimes we want to be able to talk to people about, what it is we need, how we can be supportive, what makes us unique, and how we then need support as a result of that. But we don't necessarily have the tools to be able to do that. So we aren't sure how to articulate it. We're not sure how to have a conversation. And what developing your own manual does is it gives you a platform to go have that conversation, right? You can take it with your teams and your projects at school and sit down and kind of all go through it. You can do this with your line manager. You can do it with your peers and your family. So it becomes a really great tool that you can leverage. And if you guys check out the Manual Me website, which I promise I will pop into the chat for you guys to have a look and feel around, there's a list of questions that you can pick from. So I've only picked a subset of the ones that I thought might be relevant for today's conversation, but there is a whole host of ones you can think about. And I really challenge you guys to have a think about what the right questions for your manual would be. And these might not be the right ones, but it's finding the ones that kind of sit with you guys. Henry says, challenging at first, but once you got into it, you found it easier. I think it's hard to self-reflect. Yeah, I agree. Thanks for sharing that, Henry. That's great. So as you guys continue to reflect on the exercise, what we will do is turn into how this then shows up at Ocado around inclusion and well-being and what that link is. And with that, Tanya, I'll pass it over to you to talk about inclusion.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Am I muted? Can you hear me, Alfie?
Yeah, I can hear you. You're absolutely fine.
Okay, cool. I had a notification come up saying I was muted, so I didn't want to talk to myself for too long. So inclusion, I think, look, and I think this exercise that we've just done is exactly that. Like, inclusion isn't just about the categories that you see. It's not just about gender, ethnicity. Yes, those matters, and yes, we need to understand what our diversity looks like from that perspective. But actually, we need to go broader than that. We want to go into that inclusivity. So whoever you are, and whatever dimension you have about whichever bit of you, you should be able to come to work and bring yourself to work. And as a workplace, we want to support you thrive. And I think that's a good place to start talking about what we actually do at Ocado, because we're very early in our journey when it comes to inclusion and diversity. We've had, I think, our first employee community was set up in 2018. So we're only three and a half years, I think, since we had our first community. We call them communities. You might have heard them elsewhere as employee resource groups or networks. But these are places where people come together, people with shared characteristics, be it the first community was Pride, so LGBTQ focus there. We've also got a parenting community, we've got a veterans community, and then we've also got other communities which might come together because they're based at the same office and they play football on a Tuesday night. So a whole spectrum of things, and they're places that people with similar interests or people that identify can come together. So that's really important to us. But we are still early in our journey. The acceleration that's taking place in our change, though, is huge. So I started in this role in April, and the progress that's been made over the last 6 months is fantastic. And Arthi and I were reflecting actually before this conversation that actually there's a lot of things that we can do and we can put on a list, and I'll share some of those with you. But actually the real change is when you see behavioural change, when you hear our leaders talking about it as one of their priorities for next year, as we heard on our live stream, our internal live stream that we did yesterday. So beginning to see that, having people in the business come to us as experts to say, I'm thinking about this, and I know we've not got very many females in our area. What can we do about it? Or I want to get more D&I awareness into my leaders. How can I help? So that shift that we've seen is huge, and as I say, accelerating very much in the last 6 months. I also think that whilst we're young in our journey, we're ambitious. So we don't just want to tick all the boxes and make sure that we've got good diversity across the piece. We really want to make sure that everyone feels included when they're here, even if they maybe don't have a label that fits into one of the typical categories. Actually, it's important to us that everyone feels included and everyone can thrive. So it's not just about the numbers. It's not about feeling included. It's about you as an individual come into Ocado, and it's a place where you can thrive. And that tells you quite a lot about how we work, and again, how closely Arthur and I work together, and how closely we both work with our talent team to actually make sure that we've got the support and the development in place to allow everyone to thrive here at Ocado. And then I wanted to give you some examples, so it's not all talk, and actually what does it mean in a business. So I've given you the example of communities. I've talked a little bit about what we've got there. Those are groups of people. They have the power to run themselves, so they're run by different people across the organisation. A couple of new communities that we see coming next year are disability and faith community. And we've also got a health and wellbeing community, a parenting community, a women's community, and our pride community. We've also developed a calendar of events. So one of the things that when I first came into this role was, there's so much to go at on a diversity and inclusion space. Our first priority was to become people-led. So what was it that mattered to our people in the diversity space? And so the communities and getting people together, hearing people's voice through there was really important. The other thing that we did was we designated a number of core celebrations, we've called them, and they might be core awareness days. So we've got 50 days across the year, which at a global level we recognise and we share information about. And knowing that there are many more, we also have a shared Google calendar so that we work on the G Suite. So we're all Google at Ocado, and people can subscribe to that calendar. So alongside all their meetings, they can see what day it is today. So a particular awareness day for a group that they might not at all be aware of. So there are a couple of things that we did pretty quickly. And we've also started that awareness and education is key. One of the things that I found fantastic at Ocado is the people. It's never too much trouble for someone to help you, and that breeds this feeling of respect across the organisation. And so I think the biggest shift that we can make, and the fastest progress we can make, is to help build on that foundation of respect and really drive some more education, some more awareness, because at the end of the day, we all only have our own experience, and that leads to bias. So build on that foundation of respect. Let's do some education. We've done some leading inclusively training with our leaders, and we've done some allies training, so how people can support groups that they might not be part of or necessarily understand. And we've also had some fun things like at Diwali. We had a wonderful table display in our head office in the entranceway there. And then we had our CEO light the menorah for Hanukkah. So that was wonderful as well. I'm conscious that I'm talking quite a lot and we're going to run out of time for questions. So a couple more things really quickly to share with you before I let Arthur talk about wellbeing, which is around data. So again, it's important that we're responding to the diversity that we've got in our business, and making sure that everyone in our business feels included. So we've got a good listening mechanism through a tool called Peakon. And in there, we ask diversity questions so people can self-identify. And then we've begun to look at that data. And so what are our various populations feeling? And one of the things I've been doing over the last couple of weeks is taking that to our exec directors to say, this is what the diversity of your function looks like. And this is what the underrepresented groups in your function are saying. And the leadership engagement, again, over the last 6 months, I've seen change hugely. I'm really, really excited about what next year brings. They really want to make a difference. And to facilitate that, we're going to have some governance forums that will start in January, where we really begin to share the data on a regular basis, and get some of our senior leaders engaged. So, Arthur, before we run out of time, I'll stop talking and let you talk about wellbeing.
Thanks for that. I think similar to Tanya, I only started in April of this year, and for context, both my role and Tanya's roles are new in the business. And so in actuality, we've only really started this journey from having permanent employees in these positions since April, which also alludes to the commitment that the organization has against these topics. And so when I talk about health and well-being, I'd say that the journey that Ocado has been on is that there's always been a thread of both health and well-being and health and safety, given our logistics environment, that's been kind of at the heart of everything that's done. There's always been some components of things that have been being done. I think the element of being able to have a role like mine now is that it all comes under one umbrella, and we're better able to kind of bring it all together in a consistent format, and in a way that really breeds to what our people want and need. So like Tanya alluded to, there's definitely an underlying thread of being able to keep a pulse on the business, focus on the data, and be very data-led in terms of what our business does or does in response to the health and well-being agenda. And some of the things I'd say that we are doing around this space is there's probably 3 pillars that I'll focus on talking about. I've written a few notes, so I apologize if I'm looking down. But the first for me has been really around setting some strong foundations. So as I said, there's always been a consistent thread of things kind of happening, but in a lot of ways they've been kind of disjointed. So being able to bring a lot of that together, and being able to be really clear on the narrative around health and well-being and how we define it as a business, and therefore then how we have a conversation around it. So you saw in the exercise that we did and some of the stuff we talked about, health and well-being is really independent to everyone and individualistic. And the way we have defined it, and this is as draft format, not finalized, is under 4 pillars, which are body, mind, purpose, and foundation. So body and mind, pretty self-explanatory. Purpose is all about this idea of meaning and sense of accomplishment. And that's heavily linked to the work that we do in our corporate responsibility space. And then underpinned by this level of foundations, which basically looks at this idea of Maslow's hierarchy of needs and saying, from a basic need perspective, do I have those things met? And we would have definitely seen a lot of those things come up to question in the last 18 months to 2 years as we've gone through the COVID journey. So one is around that language and that narrative, and also making sure that there's consistency around how we approach some of the conversations we have and the governance around some of that stuff. There's also been a sense of, making sure we have some key products that support our people. So at Ocado, we offer our employees Unmind. We also have an EAP, but it's trying to evolve those, right? Like, are those the right tools for our business? Is that what our employees need? And so keeping a consistent check on that. And that is definitely something on the top of my mind in terms of, are those the right tools for the next couple of years, or do we need to evolve that and or offer different things to different business areas and or countries? The other thing is around policies. I remember somebody asked a question around policies at the beginning. So we are very heavily policy driven. In this past year, in 2021, we released a new policy called Work from Anywhere, which is a lot in response to what you're seeing a lot of big tech organizations do, but also in response to what we've endured through COVID around people wanting more flexibility and autonomy. So it gives people the opportunity to work 30 days of the year from anywhere in the world, if their role allows for it. And you can kind of chop and change that into 4 separate weeks. So it gives people a lot of opportunity to kind of meet various needs that they might have. And then this year, the focus on policies is really looking at things like infertility, hormonal health, so things like menopause and andropause, and we're looking at various aspects of that, but we are looking at it from a gender agnostic perspective, so the male and female versions of both. But that's kind of top of mind for this year. And then if we go into the next platform, I'm conscious because I want to leave some time for questions, is it's really around our people and how we support our people. And there's 2 layers in that. So there's everyone and what sort of service is everyone. And then there's managers and leaders. And if I look at everyone first, Tanya alluded to the fact that we have a health and well-being inclusion community that we've been focused on rebranding and refreshing for relaunch in January. We've set up a mailbox so people can have access to us and have a key load of contacts. We've been doing events and live streams and challenges. So we've done a couple of live streams this year, one around on World Mental Health Day, which was an internal panel that focused on bringing together our global population to have a conversation about the lines between the intersectionality between both inclusion and health and well-being. We also recently did one on men's health, which featured an interview with our CFO. And in January, we are kicking off a challenge called Run Grateful, which is all about banding together globally to run grateful miles all through January. And you don't have to run, you can walk, you can, however you do the miles, basically. So we've done loads of stuff like that. We've been focused on education and building out a health and well-being box set that we have that has loads of content that we're evolving. And for managers and leaders, we're trying to look at now specifically what's the training requests around that and how do we provide support to such an impactful layer in our business that holds so much of the pastoral element of how they manage their teams, but also then how do we set them up for success in terms of, you know, what are the tools that they need to take care of themselves and then therefore then to be able to role model their behaviors. So perhaps having them do their own versions of their own manuals so that they can have these conversations with their teams. And then the last is really around external presence. So looking at things like, are there standards that we can look at from a health and well-being perspective globally that we can sign up to? How are we working with our clients? And lastly, how can we start to get engaged with more external conversations around the health and well-being space in the workplace and start to be really seen as an organization that is not just taking care of the people internally, but also helping to have a positive impact across society. So that's kind of the whistle-stop tour for us around those areas. I'm conscious that we have about 10 minutes left and we want to give you time for questions. You know, like I think I'll hand it over to Tanya in a second to wrap up, but I think we've both alluded to the fact that we take our roles very seriously and that we understand the responsibility and the level of privilege that comes with them. And so we are constantly trying to evolve and understand what the need is in the business, but also what the market and external world is telling us around these topics. And if there's anything we've learned over the last 24 months, it's that these topics are here to stay. And really, I think that the level of commitment that Ocado showed by picking up our roles is really showing the commitment that they have to these agendas across the board. Tanya, over to you to wrap up.
Thanks, Arthi. I think you just wrapped us up really nicely there, actually. Yeah, guys, I hope you can see the passion that's come through and we've given you some of those examples. It's definitely not just talk, certainly not at Ocado. Hopefully we've given you some insight there into the culture that is Ocado and the culture shift that we're going on very fast at the moment as inclusion and wellbeing really comes to the heart of what we're doing. I just want to open us up for questions so that if there is anything that you'd like to know that we haven't covered so far, please jump in, drop it in the chat there. We've got a question there from Oliver, so let me read it out. I'm wondering how you have worked towards well-being seen as being an integral part of the business. I've worked in the public sector in mental health, I assume, and well-being for many years, both as a clinician and consultant. I've been trying to influence where I can, but often get hit with this is a tick box exercise. Culture takes a long time to change, especially in old school. Absolutely. Arthi, do you want to start on that one?
Yeah, I'd say, so what I probably haven't gone a lot into is when I started in this role, I was doing it for Deloitte in consulting, where I spent the majority of my career. And I'd say the thing that I've had the biggest, the thing that I think has allowed me to have the biggest impact, especially when I was starting in the role where I was the fact that I lived and breathed what it felt like to be in that business. And so I could go to the partners and have a conversation around, this is what it looks and feels like on the ground for your staff, and this is the implications of it. And I had the data to back it up, but I also had the personal experience of it, right? Like I had grown up through that environment. I knew what it was like to be a new grad versus a middle manager versus a senior leader in the business. And that helped to really shift the conversation, because then it seemed like we can't really hide away from it, right? Our levels of people getting signed off were increasing. The topic was becoming really apparent. And I think oftentimes it can seem like a tick box, but I definitely was seeing senior leaders starting to flip the dial on it. And I think one of the other things that really helps is having senior leaders own the conversation. That's another big thing. So the thing that I saw when I was in organizations before, and I'm continuing to see, and I think Tanya alluded to it, in the fact that we are definitely getting a lot more engagement from our executive directors and board around the topic, which help the severity of, where we are with it and how important it is for us, is getting those leaders to talk about it more and more, and owning components of it. Therefore, then it doesn't feel like a tick box because there's something behind that. And I think the other thing is really about building the business case. I mean, the last 24 months are a complete example. There's thousands of statistics and things you can pull on to really help make it seem like actually we can't make this a tick box, right? Like every day you open up the news, there's another example of a company that's doing something or someone that's done something. I mean, and everyone's heard about the Great Resignation. This is our way of, if companies don't show up to this and don't do more than what the tick box is, there's an even bigger challenge that they'll face. So I think you have to build on a lot of these things to help build the relevance in the topics that you have to do. And if all else fails, the thing that I definitely saw a lot of when I was at Deloitte that saw a lot of partners shudder was having them do a manual of me exercise and then being like, oh, okay, I get it now. And I'm not saying it's the right thing for everyone, but it definitely was a thing that when you gave them the space and they had the thinking, they recognized how hard it was and where they were compared to where others were. And that definitely became a joining factor.
Yeah, I agree with, I definitely agree with what Arthur said. I'd kind of summarize it, Oliver, and it's data and it's leaders. And I think the change, you see that in most changes, but when you're talking inclusion, when you're talking well-being, the leaders have to lead it. They have to believe in it, and they have to be visible in that belief. And then, data is often how you get them on board. So whether it's internal insight as to what people are saying and feeling, or whether it's that external insight that says this is actually going to affect the profitability of your business, then it's so powerful. Okay, should we go for some more questions?
Yeah, we have another question from Elijah. It says, how do you handle issues of security and safety of your workers when brought to your notice individually? I mean, every situation I'd say is completely different. There's always a high level of confidentiality to keep, but I always labor on the fact of it's confidential until I know that some action needs to be taken. I'll always ask for permission before anything is shared or done, but I don't know if I can give you a rounded answer because I think every case is definitely managed in its own unique way because everyone's circumstances are different. Tanya, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, I think that's spot on. Should we go to the next one? So how does inclusion help in attracting? I'm going to take you through the parts of your question in bits here so that we can respond to each one individually. So how does inclusion help in attracting talent from diverse communities? I think, my view on that is that inclusion is the act and diversity is the fact. So diversity is the number that tells us how diverse we are, but actually what we're doing about that and making our workplace inclusive is how well those individuals thrive in a business and how happy they are in the business. So I think number one, it actually means that it's a place that our diverse communities want to be. And I think number two, actually demonstrating that and being visible about that is so powerful because oftentimes individuals who are in a minority group actually want to go and work in a place where it is recognized. And the data tells us that. That's one of the things that we've looked at recently, actually, about trying to improve our ethnic diversity. Actually, one of the things that really matters to individuals from an ethnic minority is that the organization is committed to diversity and inclusion. So I'm going to pass the next bit of the question. I hope that answers it, but I'm going to pass the next bit of the question to you, Arthi.
Yeah,
for health and well-being.
I'm conscious because I think at like 12 o'clock, we literally just get shut down. Okay. So if there are questions we didn't answer, I'm sure you can find both Tanya and I on LinkedIn and definitely connect and ask questions away. But I would say that, people are engaged with the tools that we have, like our EAPN and Mind and some other of the things that we have. But we are now only on the journey to really understanding and unpicking some of the data on that engagement and figuring out, like I was saying before, are these the right tools that we have in place and do we need to offer new things or shift and change? And so I'd say, yes, they are engaged. Are they the right tools? I think we're figuring out whether that is the right response. And that's definitely the focus for the year ahead. I'm conscious that we will get shut down, so I might just say that it's probably better for us to leave it here for now. And then if you guys want to connect, please feel free to look us up on LinkedIn. Thanks, everyone, for joining today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for being part of it.